NEC Section 225.30d addresses the number of feeders supplied to a building or other structure. The specific scenario involves a retail center where parking lot lighting and wall sconces are being fed from a store's electrical panel. The question is whether extending the conduit and conductors from the store's panel to a house panel on the exterior and splicing wall sconces into a box within the store complies with NEC 225.30d. According to the information provided, the proposed setup is not compliant with 225.30d. The NEC mandates that feeders to guest houses, garages, or other detached buildings be installed using a continuous cable that enters the building at least 2 feet above the finished grade. NEC Section 220.10 defines a feeder as all circuit conductors located between the service equipment, the source of a separately derived system, or another power supply source in the final branch circuit over current protective device. The purpose of 225.30d is to prevent hazards such as someone digging in their yard and hitting a feeder or a vegetable garden being watered with energized hot water. The NEC provides minimum requirements, and in some cases, deviations may be approved by the authority having jurisdiction, or OJ, if the intent of the code is met. For instance, running the conduit and conductors at 4 feet above grade instead of 2 feet outside of a public access area could potentially be approved if the AHA determines that the intent of the code is satisfied. In the context of the retail center, to fully comply with the intent of NEC 225.30d, a separate feeder to the store would be necessary. This separate feeder ensures that the parking lot lighting and wall sconces are independently supplied, minimizing potential hazards and adhering to the safety standards outlined in the code. There is an exception to the separate feeder rule. If the store was classified as a limited energy system under 760.15, a separate feeder might not be required. However, this classification depends on the specific characteristics and usage of the electrical system within the store. In summary, the initial plan to extend the conduit and conductors from the store's panel to the exterior house panel and splice the wall sconces within the store does not meet the requirements of NEC Section 225.30d. Compliance necessitates either a separate feeder to the store for the parking lot lighting and wall sconces or qualifying the store's electrical system as a limited energy system under 760.15. Always consult with a qualified electrical inspector or engineer to ensure full compliance with local and national electrical codes. It is important to clarify the scope and applicability of Section 225.30d. This section primarily focuses on the number of feeders allowed to supply a building or structure. It does not explicitly address the wiring methods or installation requirements for feeders that pass through other buildings. The primary concern of 225.30d is limiting the number of feeders to prevent overloading and ensure safety. The continuous cable requirement mentioned, entering the building not less than 2 feet above finished grade, is generally associated with feeders supplying detached buildings as described in other sections of the NEC. To ensure a compliant installation, consider the following points. Firstly, determine the total load requirements for the parking lot lighting and wall sconces. This will help determine the appropriate feeder size and overcurrent protection. Secondly, evaluate the existing electrical capacity of the store's panel. Ensure that adding the additional load will not overload the panel or any of its circuits. Thirdly, consider installing a separate service disconnect for the parking lot lighting and wall sconces at the exterior house panel. This will provide a convenient and safe means of disconnecting power to these loads for maintenance or emergencies. Fourthly, ensure that all wiring and equipment are suitable for outdoor use and installed in accordance with NEC requirements for wet locations. Fifthly, properly ground all equipment and conductors to minimize the risk of electrical shock. Sixthly, label all panels and circuits clearly to facilitate identification and troubleshooting. Finally, obtain the necessary permits and inspections from the local AHA before commencing any electrical work. Remember that the NEC is a comprehensive document, and it is essential to consult the latest edition and any applicable local amendments to ensure full compliance. Additionally, it is always advisable to seek guidance from a qualified electrical professional when designing and installing electrical systems. In the specific scenario described, the key issue is whether the store building is considered the source of the power supply for the parking lot lighting and wall sconces. If the store's panel is the original point of supply, then extending the circuit through the store to the exterior house panel might be considered a violation of the intent of 225.30d. However, if the service equipment for the entire retail center is located elsewhere and the store's panel is merely a subpanel, then the requirements of 225.30d might not directly apply. In this case, the installation would need to comply with other relevant NEC sections regarding feeder installations and wiring methods. To further clarify the compliance requirements, consider these additional factors. Firstly, the physical separation between the store building and the parking lot lighting and wall sconces. If the lighting and sconces are considered to be part of a separate structure, then the feeder requirements for detached buildings would apply. Secondly, the ownership and management structure of the retail center. If the retail center is under single management and the parking lot lighting and wall sconces are considered to be common area lighting, then the installation might be subject to different requirements than if the lighting and sconces were serving a separate tenant space. Thirdly, the specific wording of the local electrical code. Some jurisdictions might have additional requirements or interpretations of the NEC that could affect the compliance of the installation. In addition to NEC 225.30d, other NEC sections that might be relevant to this installation include: firstly, 210.25 regarding branch circuits in multi-occupancy buildings; secondly, 215 regarding feeders; thirdly, 230 regarding services; fourthly, 300 regarding wiring methods; fifthly, 310 regarding conductors for general wiring; sixthly, 408 regarding switchboards and panel boards. To ensure a safe and compliant installation, it is crucial to perform a thorough assessment of the existing electrical system, the load requirements of the parking lot lighting and wall sconces, and the applicable NEC requirements and local codes. Consult with a qualified electrical engineer or inspector to obtain expert guidance and ensure that all work is performed in accordance with the industry best practices and applicable regulations. Remember that electrical work can be dangerous, and it is essential to take all necessary precautions to protect yourself and others from electrical hazards. Always de-energize circuits before working on them, use appropriate personal protective equipment, and follow safe work practices. In summary, the compliance of the proposed installation with NEC 225.30d depends on several factors, including the location of the service equipment, the physical separation between the store building and the parking lot lighting and wall sconces, the ownership and management structure of the retail center, and the specific wording of the local electrical code. A thorough assessment of these factors, along with consultation with a qualified electrical professional, is essential to ensure a safe and compliant installation. The initial assessment suggests that the proposed installation is likely not compliant with 225.30d due to the requirement for a separate feeder to detached buildings or structures. However, further investigation and consultation are necessary to confirm this and to determine the best course of action for achieving compliance. In cases where the interpretation of the NEC is unclear or subject to debate, it is always advisable to seek a formal interpretation from the AHA. The AHA is the final authority on the interpretation and enforcement of the electrical code, and their interpretation will be binding. To obtain a formal interpretation, submit a written request to the AHA outlining the specific situation and the questions that need to be answered. Include all relevant documentation, such as drawings, specifications, and calculations. Be prepared to attend a meeting with the AHA to discuss the issue and answer any questions they might have. The AHA interpretation will be provided in writing and will serve as the official guidance for the installation. Remember that the goal of the NEC is to ensure the safety of people and property from electrical hazards. Compliance with the code is not merely a matter of following rules and regulations, but of protecting lives and preventing accidents. Always prioritize safety in all electrical work, and never compromise on safety to save time or money. In the context of the retail center, consider the long-term implications of the electrical installation. Will the parking lot lighting and wall sconces be used for many years to come? Will the electrical system need to be upgraded or expanded in the future? By planning for the future, you can ensure that the electrical installation is robust, reliable, and able to meet the evolving needs of the retail center. In addition to the technical aspects of the electrical installation, consider the aesthetic aspects as well. Will the parking lot lighting and wall sconces be visually appealing and enhance the overall appearance of the retail center? Will the electrical equipment be concealed or integrated into the building's architecture? By paying attention to both the technical and aesthetic aspects of the installation, you can create a space that is both safe and beautiful. Finally, remember that electrical work is a skilled trade that requires specialized knowledge and training. Do not attempt to perform electrical work unless you are qualified and experienced. Hire a licensed electrical contractor to perform all electrical work, and ensure that they are properly insured and bonded. By entrusting the electrical work to qualified professionals, you can ensure that it is done safely, correctly, and in compliance with all applicable codes and regulations. Remember, the AHJ has the final say in interpreting and enforcing the NEC, so it's best to work closely with them. Consider any future expansion of the retail center to avoid future complications. Proper documentation is important for future reference. Electrical work should only be performed by qualified personnel. Keep safety as the top priority. The electrical installation should enhance the retail center's appearance. Hire a licensed and insured contractor for all electrical work. NEC aims to protect people and property from electrical hazards. Formal interpretation from AHJ will be binding. Seek formal interpretation from AHJ for unclear cases. The code aims to protect lives and prevent accidents. Involve the AHJ early in the planning process. The proper documentation is critical.